but little did Ferguson know that the next decade was going to be one of, if not the most successful decades ever for the club. In the early 90s, a group of 6 young talents began to form in the youth academy, going by the names of David Beckham, Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, Nicky Butt, Phil Neville and Gary Neville. These group of young talents became known as the Class of 92 and were an essential in United's success over the next lot of years. But more about that later. At the start of the 90s, Ferguson began to turn the club's fortunes around and by making key signings like Peter Schmeichel and Dion Dublin. They finished 6th in the 1990-91 season and battled it out for the title in the 91-92 season. However, they lost it to Leeds after a poor end to the season. This brings us to 1992, where there's now a problem. A big problem. You see, English football was getting worse and worse. Hooliganism was rife, stadiums were a mess and clubs felt hard done by. In 1990, London Weekend Television met with the Big Five, which consisted of Man United, Spurs, Arsenal, Everton and Liverpool, and discussed breaking away from the traditional English league to form a completely brand new league. Why? Well, it's simple. However, those 5 clubs turned into 22 and in 1992 the Premier League was born. United started the season slow, with Dion Dublin being ruled out in October. They were now lacking a proper forward to help them score more goals, so they decided to go for Leeds United striker Eric Cantona for £1 million in early November. Cantona swiftly became a star player in the squad, helping the team climb back up the table, and after storming ahead going their final 10 games unbeaten, they lifted the title for the first time in 26 years. Although this was a great achievement, Ferguson knew that work could be done to make the squad even better. In the summer of 93, they signed Irish midfielder Roy Keane for a record-breaking £3.75 million. He, as well as Eric Cantona and Ryan Giggs, dominated the league. 3 games in, they were top of the table and they kept that throughout the entire season, being 10 points ahead in October and 16 points ahead by the new year. This sheer dominance won them the title with ease, as well as the FA Cup to claim the first ever double. They were runners up to Blackburn in the 94-95 season, then won it the next 2 seasons to make it their 4th title in 5 years. During this time, Ferguson sold experienced players like Paul Ince and Mark Hughes, and instead of replacing them with big money signings, he trusted the youth players Nicky Butt, David Beckham, Gary Neville and Phil Neville. Oh yeah, and Cantona did that. The media pounced on Ferguson after refusing to make any big signings, but Fergie knew that these lot of players were going to change the club forever. In the following years, the club signed key players like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Teddy Sheringham, Andy Cole, Jaap Stam and Dwight York, whilst at the same time saying goodbye to players like Brian Robson, Eric Cantona, Gary Pallister, Brian McClare and Lee Sharp. This brings us to the 98-99 season, otherwise known as one of, if not the best season the club has ever had. During this time, many English clubs had achieved the double, otherwise known as the Premier League and the FA Cup, but no one got even close to reaching one of the greatest achievements known to man, the English treble, consisting of 1 Premier League, 1 Champions League and 1 FA Cup. The season started rather normal. Ferguson signed both Jaap Stam and Dwight York in the summer to replace Brian McClare and Gary Pallister. Despite losing the Charity Shield to Arsenal in early August, they grabbed their first victory in Game Week 3 against Charlton Athletic. The first half of the season was rather slow and by the new year they sat 4th. However, they picked up form and went on a rampage, going unbeaten 20 games between December and May to claim yet another Premier League title. However, the job still wasn't finished. They began their FA Cup run with an easy win against Middlesbrough, and despite going 1-0 down to Liverpool, they managed to score 2 last-minute goals to seal their spot in the next round against Chelsea. After going to a replay, United managed to edge it out in front to set up a semi-final tie against Arsenal. David Beckham's early strike opened the score, however Arsenal levelled and it was forced to go into extra time. The game was at a standstill, but that was until, in the 109th minute, Ryan Giggs managed to slot home the winner to send United to Wembley to face Newcastle in the FA Cup final. This proved to be a fairly easy game as United came out on top thanks to goals from Sheringham and Scholes to gift United with yet another double. However, once again, the job still wasn't finished. They began the Champions League campaign by finishing second in a group which consisted of Bayern Munich, Barcelona and Brøndby. They faced Inter in the first leg of the quarterfinals, beating them 2-0 at Old Trafford, then managing to grab a draw at the San Siro to take them to the semi-finals against other Italian giants Juventus. Now it's safe to say this team was stacked with talents, like Antonio Conte, Didier Deschamps, Edgar Davids and a young Zinedine Zidane. All managed under Carlos Ancelotti. They managed to scrape a draw at Old Trafford, however this was a major disadvantage as they now needed to get a win in Turin against one of the greatest teams in the world at that time. And that was quickly realised as within just 11 minutes United were down 2-0. It looked like their hopes were gone. But then, in the 24th minute, Roy Keane managed to reduce the deficit and slot a goal in the hope that this goal would bring more momentum to keep going. And sure enough, just 10 minutes later, Dwight Yorke managed to level the score. However, this wave of momentum was quickly halted as Roy Keane was shown a yellow card, meaning he would be suspended if they were to make it to the final. That didn't stop him though, as he kept fighting, making sure Juventus didn't score. Despite this, Juventus piled on the pressure, trying to find a winner. United were damaged even more as Paul Scholes got booked, meaning he would also be suspended if they reached the final. United were hanging on by a thread, but that was until, in the 83rd minute, Andy Cole did the impossible and scored the winner in Turin against one of the strongest Juventus sides ever seen. They had done it. They had reached the final against German giants Bayern Munich in search to make history and crown themselves as the first English club to win the domestic treble. As United came out the Camp Nou, it was quickly made apparent that this Bayern Munich side was not going to be easy to beat. Within only 6 minutes, Bayern managed to score through a free kick and United's chances became small. Through the next 80 minutes, it followed the same pattern. Bayern piled on the pressure with chance after chance after chance. And although United had their fair share of chances, they couldn't follow through on them. But that was until, in the 91st minute, when Teddy Sheringham managed to score a last-minute equaliser to send the game into extra time. Or that's what they thought. Just 2 minutes later, United went another corner. This was their chance to potentially win the game. Beckham curled the cross into the box. And what do you know, on the other side of that cross was a young Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
With the goal for Manchester United!
They had done it. They were now the first English club to win the English treble, practically crowning themselves as one of, if not the greatest club in England. But the question was now, what was next?